Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversations. I want to thank my sponsors, the Health Channel. So please sign up for their newsletters for anything regarding your health, and Alexa's Workspaces. If you ever need just a space for an hour, a boardroom, or a small office, she will make it happen. Alexa's Workspaces. And we welcome a resource through social media with Aventura Moms and Beyond. And from the Power of the Heels, please come to our networking the second Thursday of every month, the next one every second Thursday at the AC Hotel in Aventura, and you can sign up at thepoweroftheheels.org. So thank you. So now, a very important topic. Maria, welcome.
Thank you, Gladys. Thank you for having me here.
So I'm going to ask you a few tough questions based that you also were from the other side. You were a criminal prosecutor. So you have both sides experience. So the way I see this, and I really wanted to ask your opinion, is the immigrants that are coming through the border. Like, my understanding is that when you ask for asylum, you knock on the door of the US and say, I need asylum for A, B, C, or D. And another thing is when you come illegally to the country, when they cross like the river, or they go under with the coyotes, or however you want to put it, that's illegal crossing. But when they cross through the border and ask for asylum, isn't that a whole different ballgame?
Right. So that is asylum, to cross the border and present yourself immediately to CBP, right? Which is they're the Border Patrol. So that's the branch in immigration that deals with all borders, whether it's at the airport or, the physical border crossing through a bridge from, in this case, we're discussing Mexico into the US. You present yourself and, for asylum. At that point, then, there's the typical process would be to take you in. Eventually you are set on an interview for credible fear occurs. And if that find that you are being truthful and that you really are, running away from persecution back home, and if you were sent back home, your fear is real, then they can grant asylum, or they can turn around and say, no, we don't believe you. And they will then place them in removal proceedings, at which time, that'll get set for a case in the future. Well, this is if they're allowed in, because some of them are turned away right away at the border, awaiting, these.
Or after they can be deported.
Right. Well, some of them, that's a huge topic right now, right? Because when they're not allowing them to go through a normal process, their access to attorneys also is lessened, which is a huge issue for these people that don't know what to expect. Perhaps they're not expressing themselves accurately, and so the facts are not being believed. And perhaps, some of them could be pretty much just saying that need asylum because they want to increase their financial earnings.
Yeah, but
a lot of them,
life-threatening.
They're not exactly. It's just they can't make it at home, and perhaps it's more of a reason that they have a sick child. I have seen that. They need more resources to take care of the family. Others simply just want to make more money in the US, and they heard that coming here, they can do that. But having access to an attorney, and even prior to crossing the border, I get calls, do I have enough for an asylum? And I will tell them, if I see a different way, if they do not qualify for asylum, that perhaps they can enter the US legally without exposing themselves to, this process of being immediately removed or not even having access to an attorney if they come in on their own and present themselves. And, decisions are being made very quickly versus going through the normal route of having ICE do the interview. Because there are other ways, Gladys, by the way. There's a new program that was instituted in January, which is the new parole process, humanitarian parole process. And that is like a great way for a lot of these people that are living in Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, or Venezuela to come in legally. And whereas before that program, they really didn't, they were coming over the border because they believed they didn't have other resources for entry into the United States. But with this program, their qualification is simply showing that they are a national, of that particular country, whether it be Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, or Haiti. And all you need is someone in the United States to say, I will support you. Once the supporter, presents itself through an application to USCIS online, there's no fee, and they show that they have sufficient means to help this person enter the US and to help them obtain a job, that's enough. Of course, I can go through more details on that because there are several steps to this process. And I think it's important for people to realize, that you don't have to necessarily just cross the border, and you don't necessarily have to have family in the US. You can use this great resource. It's a supporter. So a supporter is different from someone who's a sponsor, which is what we typically see when we are doing like the family immigration applications, and they have to sign a contract that they will support that person until they become a US citizen. And there's some other details with that, but generally that's what a sponsor is. So there is liability, right? During the Trump years, we heard how they were going to start, the administration wanted to pursue the sponsors who had sponsored these immigrants that for whatever reason, the applications were denied or not, and used government benefits. And so they were going to go back to the sponsors to sue them for the funds that the immigrants had used. I have never seen that actually occur in practice, but with this new process of humanitarian parole, it's not a sponsor, it's not considered a sponsor. It is a supporter, which is really an important difference because you're not signing a contract with the government saying that you're going to be liable and responsible for this person financially. You're just saying, I have enough means to bring them here and help them set up while I help them get a job because they're allowed to work. And also, it's important to note that this is for 2 years. It's not an indefinite stay. However, it is a legal manner of coming into the United States that could open different opportunities for you once you're here. So
for example, the people that are coming here can make up for all the lack of staffing that we're now experiencing.
Correct. So because they can work, and some of the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but some of the statistics show that a lot of these immigrants that are coming through the border do have a minimum of high school education. There are some, of course, there are numbers that do not have high school education, but there's a good percentage of them that do, and even college education, so that they can actually enter the workforce and be productive. particularly in these times, as you said, because we're experiencing a lot of employers experiencing difficulty obtaining good help at different levels. It doesn't always have to be professional.
Oh, correct, because there's like, for example, the farmers and
Right.
construction.
Correct. It's particularly those industries. But again, I think that getting the word out, I mean, people are getting a little bit frustrated with the system because it does take a while for the first receipt to come in. Is not too bad as for wait time. It's taking a few weeks to a couple of months for that receipt to come in, but there's a second receipt that they will the supporter and the beneficiary that's coming in will get from USCIS, and that is important to maintain an email account that you're monitoring, because that second receipt will have a code that the person that's coming in from these 4 countries, from one of these 4 countries, that is how they link their account, their USCIS account, in order to do the second part of this process, because there are a total of 6 different components, parts that go to this process, if you would like me to continue.
Well, there was a lot of noise of people like really scamming. All the people wanted to come in with calls, I
Right.
can help you. And they charge a lot of money, and these people don't have a lot of money. They're in
Right.
debt forever just to come here. So the scams are also huge.
So yes, at the very beginning, you saw the scams everywhere. You saw them in TikTok, how people were being scammed. This is why it's very important. Number 1, do not use a notario. Seek out an attorney. If you're not sure if the person's an attorney, you can always, in Florida, for example, you can look up the Florida bar, put their name in, and see if
Or
they're
in
barred
any
here.
state, right? Not
Or in
only in
any
Florida,
state.
in any state, you put the name and you see if they have the bar.
Right. Find out if they're really an attorney that's helping you. And if you're doing this on your own, then you can file it on your own by creating a USCIS account. And then it gives you a link to go ahead and apply using the form I-34A. And then you follow the prompts. However, I always encourage people to at least reach out to attorneys to help them, because if the person that you're trying to bring in has a residence that perhaps they haven't even used it, it's been years since they've been in this other country that is not Nicaragua or Haiti or Cuba or Venezuela, that will be an issue when they do attempt to come in. In other words, they can be granted the authorization on paper, and I have seen this happen, where USCIS actually says you are approved. They have downloaded their CBP1 application, which is one of the steps. They've gone through the prompts. They've done their vaccinations. They're ready to go. They get the authorization from USCIS. They then present themselves at the airport if they're flying in. And once they're trying to board their plane, they may be told at that point, or it could happen when they arrive in the United States, that they do not have authorization to board that plane and continue on their journey, which is shocking considering they're sitting there with a printed paper saying USCIS has granted you authorization to travel. Now, a little bit about that. Authorization to travel is that. So preliminarily, it looks like you're qualified. However,
It is not.
However, there are cases where CBP, remember, always maintains, can use their discretion to say, this person, we found something in their background that we're not comfortable with, and we don't feel that they should have parole, and they can send you right back home. It has happened. Like I said, it can happen when they're boarding. It can happen when they arrive here. Just like when you and I travel, we present ourselves to the officers in customs. So that's CBP, and they determine whether we should be allowed in. Okay, that's a determination. They take a look if you had any criminal touches that could potentially prohibit you or place you in deportation. It doesn't always, it could be seen at that point, which is why I always stress that you use an attorney, not a paralegal, not a notario, to have them really review your application and your background to make sure that there shouldn't be an inclusion of other documents. Perhaps you gave up your permanent residence in another country. Well, that document
That will
should be
appear.
included. Yeah, it should be included because it may not always come up, but I have seen it come up where they do catch it, although the person's been out of that country, they renounced their permanent residence. That did not show, and they're still showing that the person has a permanent residence, particularly if they have applied for some kind of visa, in the last few years or so, then they will go by that documentation.
So let me ask you something. We've been getting bombarded with a message that we're being invaded by an influx of illegal immigrants at the border, like literally. And I saw yesterday a commercial that Trump put it out there that literally we are invaded and that there's massive amounts of people coming in illegally. I was under the impression that a lot of the people that are illegal in this country do not come through the border. They actually overstay their visas and stay here without an immigration status.
So I
what's
have
the reality?
Right. So I have seen some numbers. They're a little old. I'm not sure if it was from like 2018, 2019, but it goes to that point where the statistics, they were able to see that 54% of the people that are illegally here did come through the border. However, 46% were overstays, meaning that they had some kind of visa that allowed them to legally enter the United States, but eventually they fell out of status. And they didn't, you could change status depending, of course, the type of visa that you're using to come into the United States. And you could, on some visas, extend the status. But except for like ESTA, some countries we have people coming in with an ESTA, and those they're very strict with. But generally, if you're coming in with a tourist visa, you can extend it, but there are people that come in with the notion that they're remaining, which in itself is illegal. You should not be
And they're
entering the
overstaying.
US. Right, and then they overstay, and that number was as high as 46%. So it's almost like even if you look
It's
at it.
almost even, but if they're crossing the border to ask for asylum, then it's a different story.
Right. Well, if you're asking at the border, it's a little bit
Asking
different,
at the
right?
border for asylum. That's how I
Right.
say knocking on the door and saying, look, I need help.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But now, and some of those numbers on the crossings did begin to drop a bit once this program came in, because a lot of people that were considering, even some of the calls that I received, that were considering crossing the border, decided, wait a minute, one of the things that I have to be careful with in order to qualify for that new, the humanitarian parole that we were just discussing, the new process for those 4 countries, is that you couldn't have crossed the border illegally, and you cannot be in the US. So that is a deterrent,
They
right?
need to do it outside.
because they should be doing this, they must be doing the process from,
Correct, the whole
outside
process.
of the United States. So if you know that there's a different avenue for you, that and crossing the border could disqualify you from this golden ticket, as I call it to my clients, then you're not going to cross the border, right? Unless, of course, you have a dire, there's
Correct.
persecution and you're talking about asylum. But I think it's been personally, in my own experience, and that's all I can speak about, a deterrent to some of the calls that I get from outside of the US, because now they know that they have a different avenue to come in legally and be able to work legally.
Yeah, because I don't think anybody wants to leave their country.
A
Everybody
lot of
that
people
is
don't.
here, everybody that is here came here because of something.
Right. They come looking for a better future for their children, for themselves. They do see the opportunity to perhaps, build that dream business. So, I mean, there's different ways. I think people just need the resources and somebody to listen to them and really dig deep in that conversation to find out what is it that they really want and what is it that they could potentially qualify for with a little help from an attorney or someone guiding them. I get people that they're not ready for a visa, perhaps. Maybe they're not qualifying for that business visa, but we can help them by educating them as to what the requirements are so that in the future they can make that move.
Correct. But the other part is, I've heard that some of the countries just asking for an appointment at the consulate, it's taking them over a year.
Yes, and that is very true. And the other thing, if you go on USCIS, you'll probably see a page, advising them that, don't pay, if you hear of anyone asking for
Correct,
money
that they're going
for
to
an appointment.
Yeah.
Yes, they're trying to warn the public about this. I know that I've had clients tell me that some of those appointments go for as much as $10,000
And
to be
it's
able to
not
get their
true.
appointment.
And
They
then
don't need to pay. An
they
appointment
don't need
is
to pay
free.
anything.
Right. The appointments are done as part of the process. And there are some ways that an attorney can help someone who, who's applying for, it could be a tourist visa, but perhaps that tourist visa is because they have a medical condition or there's something going on with a family member here where we're talking about emergencies. So there is a way to sort of skip the line or at least be able to communicate with the consulate to let them know there's a huge problem going on in my life or in my family. This is a situation. I always ask for evidence, so they should definitely gather all medical records if it happens to be medical reasoning. That's just one, right? It doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. And potentially they can skip that line and come into the United States a lot quicker.
Okay, so before we leave, because I have two questions. I know that there's like the numbers more or less are between 11 million and 12 million dollars of illegal immigrants in the United States. So, and we have a lack of labor. Is there anything being done? Because all these people can actually work, pay taxes, because that would be an increase in revenue based on all the taxes if they become legal, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and there's a lot of shortage of, like we talked before, of labor. Like I know companies of construction companies that have left Florida because of all the restrictions that this government has put on the state.
Yes, you're talking about the change in July 1st.
Yeah, the change in July 1st. So they're moving out.
Right.
And
So,
Those are people that are still working, but they're not paying taxes. So if there is like a kind of, I don't know, like permit, that's what I would do. A permit with certain conditions that would be renewed if they can prove that they have a job, that they can speak English, and that they have no criminal background.
right. So there is, as of May, there's a bill that's being introduced. It's still in the House of Representatives, introduced by Maria Elvira Salazar and as well as Veronica Escobar. They're the ones that spearheaded it. There are other people across the aisle that are helping with this bill. And what they're trying to do is people that have been in the United States that are undocumented with a minimum of 5 years of living in the US with no criminal records. Okay, and there's several other, details to that. They're trying to get them to be able to legalize their position by setting a bill where they would have to pay approximately $700 for 7 years per year. So it's approximately $5,000. And it's sort of like a probation period to make sure that, there's no criminal records being picked up or anything. And then at the end of that, there's a second step. Well, they will pay in again, a certain amount of funds for another 5 years in order to lead them into a residence. So there is something being done. They would also have to pay a tax, an additional, what's called a dignity levy of 1.5% tax. And they would have absolutely no access to any government program and must buy health insurance, which is another thing. A lot of people think that because
that makes sense.
That they're
totally
here.
Makes sense because it's not a cost to the government, but it's help
Right.
to get some extra labor.
Yeah.
Maria, this has been really, really interesting, and we can stay here talking forever. I have just one last question. I don't know if you know the answer, but do we know anything about the children that were separated at the border? And if they have been reunited with their family, or what's going on? There were more than 3,000 children.
Right. I know efforts will be made to reunite the children with their families, or, sometimes their families weren't here with someone, an extended family member. I'll have to take another look at that to see exactly what the latest is. And I'll be sure to get back to you on that.
Thank you so much. If anybody wants to contact you, what's the name of your legal firm?
It's My Florida Immigration, LLC. We're based here in Miami, Florida, but we help people all across the world with both business and personal, family immigration.
Maria, thank you so, so much. Oh, one last question before we leave that I had it. The drugs, are they really coming in from the border?
So that is something, they're saying like a lot of the crimes are being done by, the people crossing the border. But the reality is that, the drugs are not necessarily coming in through the people crossing the borders. They're coming in through legal avenues, at least from my understanding and from based on my research. So that's a little bit of a misnomer. We can talk about that a lot more on a completely new segment.
So thank you so much. And to everyone, have an amazing day, and above all, stay safe.
Thank you, Gladys.
Until next week.